Tonight, we on World is One have been tracking the developments ongoing in Afghanistan. The situation has now gotten much worse. 2 suicide bombers and gunmen attacked crowds of Afghans flocking to the Hamid Karzai International Airport on Thursday. 13 US troops and at least 90 Afghans have been killed. The deadline of August 31st is fast approaching, and that is when the US evacuation mission will wrap up. US President Joe Biden has vowed to hunt down those responsible for the twin explosions at the Kabul airport. But what will happen to all the Afghans who are left behind? Is there a more potent threat emerging for the United States? Welcome to WION World is One. My name is Priyanka Sharma, and on this special weekly broadcast of the WION VOA co-production, we'll bring you all the updates from the US about its stand on the Afghan crisis. Let's get started. 2 suicide bombers and gunmen attacked crowds of Afghans flocking to the airport on Thursday, killing 13 US troops and at least 90 Afghans. According to the US and Afghan officials, the Islamic State group, known as ISIS-K, has now claimed responsibility for these attacks. The US general overseeing the evacuation said that the attacks would not stop the US from evacuating Americans and Afghan allies, and flights out of the country were continuing following the fall of Afghanistan to the Taliban last week. The group is now vowing to protect the minority and women's rights. But many Afghans in the United States are concerned about the well-being of their family and friends and the future of their homeland under Taliban rule. Voice of America's Anshuman Apte spoke with some Afghan community members. Take a look.
Mohammad Daad Sarwari and his friends are nervously watching events unfold in Afghanistan.
It's not a fall of a regime, it's a fall of a generation. An educated generation of girls and boys who are educated, who built their dream, their hope for a better future of Afghanistan at the cost of blood and treasure of the United States and other allied countries in Afghanistan.
They are worried about their families and friends under Taliban rule.
Not only my family, but the whole country is facing the same problem. We can't bring our families here, that's one problem. And we can't go there, that's another problem.
Right now it's unknown. They were saying right now it's the Taliban as a one group, but it's not true. Right now there's one of them is making one statement. Then the next day the other is making another statement, which is really dangerous.
Afghans whom VOA spoke with in America disagree with America's handling of the troop withdrawal. Joseph Azam co-founded Afghan Americans for Biden-Harris.
I think the buck stops with President Biden because he is in charge, right? And so that is something that cannot be argued. However, this process of withdrawal started under President Trump. The back and forth continued from President Bush onto President Obama.
Azam accuses former President of Afghanistan Ashraf Ghani and his administration for incompetence and corruption, and says they are also to blame for the country's current state. Others say the focus now must be on how the Taliban will rule.
What they are saying right now, we are going to add minorities and respect to human rights. I don't believe it. We can see a sign of those that they already not following it, what they are saying.
Some Afghan Americans are holding out hope.
It appears that the Taliban gave protection to former high-ranking government personnel, even those who were governors, those who were military commanders or ministers.
Members of the Afghan community are urging the US and other nations to use leverage to ensure the Taliban respect human rights and honor other promises.
If the Taliban is really would like to govern on Afghanistan and they would like to rule over Afghanistan, they desperately need support, financial support, political support from the world, from other countries. And that support needs to be conditional, and that's the kind of pressure that they can utilize over Taliban right now and also their sympathizer.
We need to adhere to international human rights. This is a humanitarian crisis that's occurring in Afghanistan right now. And we also need to ensure that any government that does come out is inclusive of all of the Afghans, regardless of their creed, regardless of their ethnicity.
The Afghan American community is also calling on the White House to speed up evacuations of all special immigrant visa applicants and their families. Anshuman Apte, VOA News, New York.
Some international students in the United States are struggling to get fully vaccinated against COVID-19 before returning to the classroom this fall. Connor Smith has more details in this next report for Voice of America.
While COVID-19 cases are rising again, international students returning to the U.S. are finding it difficult to get vaccinated. Jenny Zhang came from China to study at Columbia University in New York. She got the Sinopharm vaccine this spring in Beijing. The vaccine has been approved by the World Health Organization, or WHO, and her school. Now, back in the U.S., Zhang is considering a Pfizer or Moderna booster.
I was a bit worried about my vaccination because I did hear that, the Sinopharm one might not be as effective, especially against the Delta variant.
Before coming back to the States in May, Zhang spent 2 weeks quarantining in Dubai. Like China, the U.S. restricts incoming travelers.
I just stayed in the hotel for 2 weeks. It was not very enjoyable.
Yoon-ha Hun, a South Korean, came back to the U.S. early to get vaccinated and stay with her aunt in Northern Virginia. COVID-19 is on the rise in South Korea, and only 20% of the population is fully vaccinated. Hun attends Pratt Institute in New York, where students must either get vaccinated or quarantine for 2 weeks. Shots are available for students upon their return.
If they were requiring students to quarantine for 2 weeks, I feel like they should at least provide a space for them to quarantine, because a lot of international students don't have a place to stay in the States.
Syracuse University student Jessica Tran had trouble getting inoculated in her home country of Vietnam, where vaccinations didn't begin in earnest until July.
We have received vaccines from the UK and from China and from Japan, and unfortunately, those are not the vaccines that are currently used in the U.S.
Like many U.S. colleges and universities, Syracuse says it is working with international students on a case-by-case basis.
Vaccinations are readily available in Syracuse, and we do not anticipate that international students will experience any difficulty in obtaining the vaccine once they arrive. Students who get vaccinated upon arrival must wear a mask and participate in weekly COVID testing until 2 weeks after their final vaccine dose.
And so right now I'm not going into the city as much. I think back at school, if I know that everyone is vaxxed, then I'd be a lot more comfortable.
Most students will return to university between now and mid-September. Connor Smith for VOA News, Washington.
Amid an unabated increase in new COVID-19 cases and deaths, Sri Lanka has now extended its national lockdown for another week. The restrictions will now remain in place till the 6th of September. The COVID-19 task force met with President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, after which it was decided to extend the lockdown that was to end on the 30th of August. Sri Lanka has been recording a surge in the number of cases and fatalities in the past few weeks. On Thursday, the nation recorded an all-time high daily caseload of 4,662 cases. Schools, gyms and swimming pools remain closed. Weddings and musical shows are banned, and a night curfew restricting movement from 10 p.m. until 4 a.m. daily will also remain in place. Medical professionals had called for an immediate nationwide lockdown to curb the spread of infections as hospitals in the country are overwhelmed with COVID-19 patients. Doctors warn that intensive care beds for coronavirus patients and morgues are rapidly nearing the overcapacity limit that currently exists, and the country's latest wave of infections began in April and has been the most severe of the pandemic. Around 80% of Sri Lanka's total deaths have occurred during this current wave. Our correspondent Dasuna Athoda has sent us this report from Colombo.
Sri Lanka is currently undergoing a 10-day nationwide lockdown, which was just extended for another week, which means this current lockdown will only come to an end at 4 a.m. on the 6th of September. This is largely because today the government did say that they will extend this lockdown purely based on the number of cases and deaths that are being reported in the country right now. More specifically, for the past few days, Sri Lanka has been recording all-time highs in both deaths and cases in their daily records. Just yesterday, Sri Lanka crossed the 200th mark in terms of daily deaths after recording 209 deaths for the 25th of August. That's not all. Sri Lanka also recorded 4,600 plus cases just for yesterday. Now, during this curfew, which is also dubbed as the quarantine curfew here in Sri Lanka, all those who are currently engaged in essential services are permitted to travel. However, those engaged in daily wage income earnings are the ones who are severely impacted, especially those who have been involved in the tourism sector, who lament that their means of income have severely depleted more than for 20 months. Reporting to you from Colombo, I'm Dasini Akada for WION News World is One.
The Delta variant has swept across Sri Lanka and is quickly moving from cities and into the suburbs. The latest barrage of cases comes as restrictions were slowly being eased following a month-long lockdown in May and June. Only around a quarter of Sri Lanka's population has been fully vaccinated. Officials are confident that they will receive enough doses to fully immunize 70% of the population by the end of September. Huh? The climate crisis is here and it's taking a toll on one of the world's poorest nations. Madagascar, a country in Africa, has become the latest victim. It has been battling its worst drought in 4 decades, and now the United Nations warns that Madagascar is on the verge of the world's first climate change-induced famine. The island nation of Madagascar is no stranger to natural disasters. It has experienced cyclones, floods, earthquakes, and even a locust plague. But the magnitude of what Madagascar is currently battling is unprecedented. Dry weather has hit the country's south. People were mostly depending on agriculture, and with the drought, they are now left without any food or livelihoods. Let's now take a look at the numbers coming in which reveal the magnitude of this crisis. 30% of the people are battling the highest internationally recognized level of food insecurity, which is level 5. The acute malnutrition rate in the country has risen to 27%. Children have been the worst hit, at least 42% under the age of 5 suffering from malnourishment. Food production in 2021 has declined by 40%. Let's now tell you how climate change sparked the ongoing catastrophe in Madagascar. Drier than usual conditions sparked drought situations, which was made worse by climate change-induced heat waves and rising temperatures. High levels of deforestation and soil erosion led to land degradation fueled by strong winds. Unprecedented sandstorms also destroyed the croplands. Let's continue with our Afghanistan coverage on WION World is One. As we know, 2 suicide bombers and gunmen attacked crowds of Afghans flocking to the Hamid Karzai International Airport on Thursday, killing 13 U.S. troops and at least 90 Afghans, according to the U.S. and Afghan officials. And to speak about this further, we're now joined by Voice of America's correspondent Amy Hybels from Washington. Amy, thanks so much for joining us. Now, given the dramatic turn of events on the ground in Kabul following Thursday's bombings outside the airport, how much of a commitment is still there to continue evacuating people?
Well, Priyanka, that commitment still stands. Right now, I am a good distance from the White House. Probably hard to see behind me, but that flag is at half-staff. The flag was lowered and remains lowered as a sign of respect for the 13 U.S. service members who lost their lives in yesterday's attack, and also for those Afghans who died. Now, on Thursday, in a White House address, U.S. President Joe Biden said, "We will not be deterred by terrorists. We will not let them stop our mission. We will continue the evacuation." Now, when asked by a reporter about the continuing U.S. presence in Afghanistan, U.S. President Biden replied, "What America says matters." Mr. Biden went on to explain that there are still American citizens in Afghanistan. There are other groups of people that also have the opportunity to get out. Those include Afghans that have helped the U.S., green card holders, personnel of their allies, SIV card holders, and women's groups and NGOs. There's still an opportunity on the ground over the next several days for them to be evacuated. President Biden has also vowed retribution for the attacks. He said, quote, "We will not forgive, we will not forget, we will hunt you down and make you pay." Mr. Biden said he has ordered his commanders to develop operational plans to strike ISIS-K assets, leadership, and facilities.
Right. Now, Amy, what have we learned about how those responsible were able to get so close to the airport gate?
Sure. Yesterday we heard from General Frank McKenzie. He's the head of U.S. Central Command. He told reporters that one of the bombers detonated in the vicinity of the Abbey Gate at the airport, while the other bombing was near the adjacent Barron Hotel. General McKenzie said the attack on the Abbey Gate was followed by a number of ISIS-K gunmen who opened fire on civilians and military forces. General McKenzie said he wanted to explain the heroism that U.S. troops are exhibiting as they scream at people that are coming onto the airfield, explaining that this is close-up work. He said the breath of the person you are searching is upon you. The general also pointed out that before Thursday's attacks, U.S. troops have successfully screened over 100,000 people at that airport. General McKenzie also said the Taliban conduct a search before people even get to the gate. Obviously, U.S. personnel will have to evaluate what happened yesterday, but he said there's nothing to convince them that the Taliban allowed this to happen. Evacuation flights from Afghanistan do continue. They're ongoing. The White House said Friday morning that 12,500 evacuees were flown out of Kabul International Airport. The U.S. is warning that more attacks could come ahead of next week's end of America's longest war.
Right, Amy, let's shift focus from the Afghanistan crisis to the COVID-19 crisis in the United States as of now. We know that some international students in the U.S. are currently struggling to get fully vaccinated against the infection before returning to the classroom. So let's talk about that. Now, my question to you is that given the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's response, or the FDA, which approved the Pfizer vaccine, what impact will this have on the number of people getting vaccinated against COVID-19 in the United States?
Sure. Public health officials are really hoping this move by the FDA will encourage more people to get the shot. And they think it will also give businesses, universities, and local governments more, give them a little bit more of an incentive to push the vaccination and put vaccine mandates in place, because lawsuits are always a concern. They feel that maybe this would give them a little bit more legal standing. That was a big deal on Monday with the FDA giving full approval to the Pfizer vaccine for those ages 16 and over. Of course, those 12 to 15 can still get that vaccine under the emergency use authorization. There are 3 vaccines right now that are being used here in the U.S., the Pfizer vaccine, Moderna, and J&J. Both Moderna and J&J said that they plan to apply for full approval from the FDA as well. Of course, it's going to take a few weeks before we see if this is going to make any impact on the number of people getting vaccinated here in this country. Right now, just over half of the American population is fully vaccinated, and of course, the Biden administration wants to see that number go up.
Right, Amy Hybels from Washington, thank you so much for joining us on this special broadcast, and thank you for all your insights. And with that, it's a wrap on this special broadcast. Thanks for watching with me, Priyanka Sharma. Stay tuned to Beyond World as One. Global news updates continue on the other side of this short break.